Welcome to the place where the things no one dares to say are spoken word by word. I am your guide, the relentless seeker with a tinfoil hat and a pile of files stamped top secret, but somehow available on the internet. You might laugh or maybe shudder as I tell you about the things the government doesn't want you to know, the maps that don't exist on Google or the names erased from history. But hey, if it's all just fiction, then why would someone try to stop you from watching this video? Lock your doors, turn off the lights, and keep your mind sharp, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see the world forever. This is the story of Flight MH370, vanished without a trace, 2014. On the night of March 7, 2014, Kuala Lumpur International Airport was buzzing as usual. Passengers lined up for check-in. Announcements echoed through the terminal. No one knew that in just a few hours, one of the greatest mysteries of the 21st century would unfold. MH370, a Boeing 777-200ER, took off at 12:41 a.m. local time, carrying 239 souls, 227 passengers and 12 crew members, on a flight to Beijing. The captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, was a seasoned pilot with over 18,000 flight hours. Alongside him, First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27, helped navigate one of the most advanced and safest aircraft in the world at the time. At 1:19 a.m., MH370 entered Vietnamese airspace. The last words from the cockpit were transmitted over the radio frequency. "Good night, Malaysian 370. After that, nothing. No distress call. No emergency signal. No locator beacon. The plane simply vanished from the sky. Civilian radar lost sight of MH370. Military radar recorded a strange blip. And then it, too, disappeared. Theories erupted: mechanical failure, terrorism, a national cover-up. But the deeper the investigation went, the darker the mystery became. And the strangest part? Clues that should have been clear were buried, erased, or explained away far too quickly. The real question isn't just, what happened to MH370? It's also, who doesn't want you to know what really happened? When things started getting strange. At first, the information released to the public was vague. News outlets reported, Flight MH370 has lost contact with air traffic control. But how exactly did it lose contact? Where? For how long? No one seemed sure. Early reports contradicted each other. Even government officials gave conflicting statements, issuing updates only to retract them later. In the midst of this confusion, some began to sense that something was off. One of the first to speak up was a civil aviation expert from Singapore. His name was never mentioned in mainstream media, but he had experience in air traffic surveillance. He said, "Something doesn't add up. A Boeing 777 doesn't just disappear unless something extremely unusual happens." His first suspicion: the ADS-B tracking system on MH370 had been manually switched off. This system automatically transmits a plane's location every few seconds. It doesn't just go offline unless someone in the cockpit turns it off. The second red flag? The ACARS communication system, used to send technical data back to the airline, also stopped working at the exact moment MH370 transitioned from Malaysian to Vietnamese air traffic control. In other words, MH370 vanished right in the blind spot between two radar zones, where no single country had full surveillance. A coincidence? Or a perfectly timed setup? Then, to add even more fuel to the fire, Malaysian military radar detected an unidentified aircraft making a sudden 180-degree turn, flying in the opposite direction of MH370's planned route, at a low altitude, cutting across the Strait of Malacca, before vanishing from radar completely. By now, independent investigators, bloggers, military analysts, and online researchers were digging deep. A group of aviation enthusiasts on Reddit and other forums uncovered something chilling. The actual time MH370 went missing didn't match the official timeline given by authorities. Initially, the Malaysian government stated that MH370 lost contact at 2:40 a.m. But later, radar data surfaced showing that the plane actually disappeared at 1:21 a.m., just 2 minutes after the captain's last transmission, Good night. Why the time discrepancy? And why cover up the real moment of disappearance? More troubling was this. At 2:25 a.m., a satellite operated by Inmarsat over the Indian Ocean received a handshake ping from MH370, proving the plane was still flying nearly an hour after it was officially declared missing. Some experts called this undeniable evidence that MH370 continued on a mysterious path. But to where? At airports, families of passengers were growing more anxious, not just about the missing plane, but about the evasive and inconsistent responses from authorities and the airline. Some passengers had unusually late online check-ins, yet were still allowed to board. A radar operator was suddenly suspended on the first day of the investigation, with no explanation. Families reported that the phones of missing passengers kept ringing for hours after the plane was supposedly gone. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture was forming. This wasn't just a missing plane. It was starting to look like someone wanted it to disappear. The first major revelation. When questions about the timing of the disappearance, radar routes, and satellite signals began to stir a wave of public suspicion, the first shocking revelation emerged, and it didn't come from the government or the airline. It came from a private British satellite company Inmarsat. On March 11, 2014, just 3 days after MH370 vanished, Inmarsat announced that they had continued receiving signals from the aircraft for nearly 7 hours after it lost contact. Yes, that's right. While the world believed the plane had crashed shortly after disappearing from radar, Inmarsat revealed that MH370 had continued flying thousands of kilometers southward over the Indian Ocean, automatically sending pings to a satellite every 30 to 60 minutes, until approximately 8:19 a.m. This completely disproved the theory of an immediate crash. It also raised a chilling question. Who was controlling the plane for those 7 hours? And why was it flying south toward nothing? No destinations, no airports, nothing but the desolate ocean? At the same time, previously undisclosed Malaysian military radar data showed that MH370 had executed a series of highly precise maneuvers after turning back. Altitude changes, multiple course adjustments, and evading surveillance zones. Maneuvers that experts said only a highly skilled pilot could perform. The question immediately shifted. Was Captain Zahari the one who made MH370 disappear? Malaysian media quickly dug into Zahari Ahmad Shah's personal life. They discovered he had an unusual passion for flight simulation, owning an advanced flight simulator at his home, where he had practiced strange flight paths with no clear destinations, including one that closely resembled MH370's final trajectory. Police searched Zahari's home. The FBI analyzed data from his flight simulator. Some media outlets ran sensational headlines. Zahari, the pilot of death? However, his family, friends, and colleagues told a different story. They described Zahari as calm, kind, family-oriented, and showing no signs of depression or instability. They insisted he would never do such a thing. While debates over Zahari remained unresolved, another revelation left the world stunned. A U.S. military surveillance aircraft with global tracking capabilities was present in the Indian Ocean at the exact time MH370's final ping was recorded. Moreover, the Diego Garcia military base, one of the U.S.'s most secretive military installations, was located precisely within the search arc Inmarsat had identified. Yet, the U.S. government stated, "We received no signal from MH370. Strangely, an American passenger, Philip Wood, an IBM technology expert, was reported to have sent a completely black image with embedded GPS coordinates from his iPhone 5. The photo's metadata allegedly placed him near Diego Garcia after the plane was declared missing. The image and Philip's story were quickly labeled as a conspiracy or hoax, but to this day, no independent verification has either confirmed or entirely debunked the original data. The initial revelations, which seemed like beacons of light in the darkness, only made the fog thicker. On one hand, MH370 appeared to have been deliberately controlled after its disappearance. On the other hand, the seemingly coincidental involvement of satellites, data anomalies, key figures, and secretive bases felt like scattered puzzle pieces, deliberately left in the open. And if that's the case, the real question is no longer, Where is MH370? It is. Who is controlling the MH370 narrative, and why have they chosen silence? Modern aviation technology and unthinkable vulnerabilities. The Boeing 777-200ER, registration 9M MRO, the aircraft used for MH370, was not an outdated machine. It was one of the safest commercial airliners ever built, with a stellar operational history and a surveillance system designed to be impossible to vanish. And yet, MH370 disappeared, raising an even more terrifying question. Are we overestimating our ability to control technology? Advanced surveillance systems, reliable until they aren't. In theory, a modern commercial aircraft like MH370 is continuously monitored by multiple layers of technology, including ADS-B, automatic dependent surveillance broadcast transmits the aircraft's position, speed, and altitude to air traffic control and ground receivers, updating in near real time. ACARS, aircraft communications addressing and reporting system, sends technical data and flight information to the airline and maintenance center. A primary and secondary radar detects and tracks aircraft. Military radar can even follow non-responding, stealth or transponder-off targets. A satellite navigation systems uses GPS, GLONASS, Inmarsat, and other networks to precisely determine an aircraft's location. These systems should have ensured that an operating aircraft could never be lost. Yet, in MH370's case, all 4 layers of surveillance stopped working almost simultaneously. The shocking truth: these systems can be manually disabled. One fact the public rarely considers is that most aircraft tracking systems can be manually disabled from the cockpit, if someone knows what they're doing. The ACARS system can be turned off using a set of switches located behind the captain's seat. ADS-B and transponder, devices that broadcast a plane's location, can be switched off with a simple toggle. Even radio communications can be cut without triggering alarms for passengers. A skilled pilot, especially one with technical expertise like Captain Zahari, could perform this within minutes without detection. And that is exactly what investigators suspect happened. Inmarsat and the ghost trail in the sky. The Inmarsat satellite company, primarily used for global internet and communications, does not directly track aircraft. However, its system inadvertently logged the final pings from MH370, sent via its SATCOM, satellite communications system, one of the rare systems that cannot be fully disabled without cutting off the plane's main power. Based on the time intervals between these pings, Inmarsat constructed 2 arcs, indicating the possible locations of the aircraft when it sent its final ping at 8:19 a.m. One arc led northward, toward Central Asia, home to multiple classified military bases. The other arc led southward into the Indian Ocean, where no commercial air routes exist and where no civilian aircraft had any logical reason to be. After heavy pressure, Malaysia chose to investigate the southern arc. Why? No one knows for sure, but many theories suggest that the northern route was too sensitive. Technological limitations or deliberate blind spots? This raises a crucial question. If a modern Boeing aircraft can vanish just by flipping a few switches, how many other flights could meet the same fate? And if we are truly unable to track a commercial plane, did someone exploit this loophole to turn MH370 into a ghost flight? Or worse, was the technology not actually disabled, but rather was the data intercepted and blocked from being seen? When the pilot begins testing the limits. In every aviation disaster, technical failures are the first thing investigators examine. But with MH370, when multiple systems coincidentally shut down at the same time, attention quickly turned toward the cockpit. And then one seemingly minor detail completely shifted the entire narrative. The flight simulator in Zahari's home. When investigators searched Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah's home, they discovered a highly sophisticated flight simulator that he had built himself. This was not a game, it was a near-perfect replica of a Boeing 777 cockpit. Zahari, a known technology enthusiast, frequently shared simulated flight paths, coordinates, and analysis on online aviation forums. Within the flying community, he was admired as a model pilot, highly skilled, open-minded, and passionate about his craft. But data recovered from his computer, decoded by the FBI, revealed something unsettling. A bizarre flight simulation conducted weeks before MH370 disappeared. The simulated flight had no clear destination. It flew southward, toward the Indian Ocean, ran out of fuel midair, and ended in the ocean. This eerily matched the southern arc, the very path that MH370 was believed to have taken, based on Inmarsat's satellite data. The immediate question, was Zaharie rehearsing something? And if so, why? Unusual actions in the real cockpit. By piecing together radar data, signal cutoff times, and satellite pings, independent investigators reconstructed a chilling scenario. 1:07 a.m., MH370 reaches cruising altitude. Everything appears normal. At 1:21 a.m., as the aircraft prepares to leave Malaysian airspace and enter Vietnam's, the transponder is turned off, exactly at the handover point between radar zones. Around the same time, the ACARS system stops transmitting data. A minute later, the aircraft executes a sharp left turn, reversing course back toward the Malaysian peninsula, without making any distress calls. All of this happened smoothly and precisely, as if someone was following a carefully pre-planned sequence. A regular pilot would never do this, unless there was an extremely serious reason. Yet MH370 issued no emergency signals, no distress calls, no requests for an emergency landing. So what was happening inside the cockpit? The more you look, the stranger it gets. Captain Zaharie's family denies that he could have done anything wrong. They describe him as cheerful, devoted to his wife and children, and showing no signs of depression. However, there were reports that Zaharie was living separately from his wife, frequently staying up late alone, and appearing more withdrawn than usual in the weeks leading up to the event. Additionally, on the night of the flight, according to official reports, Zaharie did not allow the co-pilot to take over during his shift, a direct violation of standard procedure. This led to speculation. Was Zaharie secretly testing something? A form of protest, a message, or a deeply personal obsession? Was this a controlled act, or a disturbing coincidence? Many were quick to declare Zaharie was the culprit, but professional investigators were more cautious. We cannot determine a person's true intentions simply based on a flight simulation, because if that were the case, should we suspect that every gamer playing Grand Theft Auto is preparing for a real-life crime? But one cannot deny the simulated flight, along with the precision in MH370's control, was too much of a coincidence to ignore. And then, another question arises. If Captain Zaharie was truly the one piloting the flight to the very end, why didn't he leave any message? No suicide note, no declaration, no clear motive. A deranged pilot would leave traces. A terrorist would send a message. But Zaharie left behind absolute silence, and a mystery the world cannot unravel. And if he wasn't the one in control of the final flight, then who was sitting behind the controls? When the picture begins to crack, as radar data, satellite signals, and flight simulations began to emerge, one thing became clear. Everything was too contradictory to be a normal accident. Malaysian authorities initially denied that MH370 had turned around. They stated, "We have no record of any unusual deviation in the aircraft's route." But just days later, they confirmed, military radar had detected MH370 making a U-turn and continuing to fly for hours. Why was this hidden in the crucial first hours? Why did it take 4 days to acknowledge radar data that the military already had? The gaps in the narrative and the unexplained dead time. One chilling fact, there was nearly a 20-minute gap between the moment the plane lost contact and the moment the military began tracking an unidentified radar signal. In that time, MH370 could have vanished completely or changed course entirely, without intervention. No fighter jets were scrambled. No emergency orders were issued. No air defense systems were activated. Did someone know what was happening and choose to do nothing? When data disappears selectively, a data analyst who worked for the Australian government publicly stated, if MH370 crashed due to a technical failure, then at least one of three systems, civilian radar, military radar, or satellite, should have detected the impact. But nothing. Even more disturbingly, raw data from Inmarsat, Malaysian military radar, and Thai military radar were withheld for months. Some were only released under intense international and independent media pressure. And when they were published, many sections were blurred, timestamps were inconsistent, or sources were unverifiable. This led to a terrifying conclusion. We didn't just lose the plane. We were being fed controlled information by someone who didn't want the truth to surface. The shift in investigators' and relatives' mentality. Something strange happened. Investigators from multiple countries, once vocal and determined, gradually withdrew from the media. Some resigned, changed jobs, or were instructed to refrain from public comments. Families of the passengers, initially trusting, began sensing something was off. We don't need a perfect answer. We just need to know what really happened, one Chinese relative pleaded at a press conference, before being dragged out by security for asking a too specific question. From Malaysia to China, Australia to the US, whispers began spreading. If MH370 didn't vanish randomly, was it made to disappear systematically? When official simulations start contradicting each other. In the search effort, 3 independent models were proposed by Malaysia, Australia, and a group of independent investigators. And strangely, the Malaysian government concluded that MH370 crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. The Australian model pinpointed a crash site hundreds of kilometers away. Meanwhile, independent investigators proposed an entirely different theory. The plane never crashed. It was redirected elsewhere. The data was inconsistent. The evidence was incomplete. But one thing was certain. No one fully trusted the official narrative anymore. When faith shatters. At this point, the skepticism was no longer limited to conspiracy theorists in tinfoil hats. It was coming from aerospace engineers, data analysts, investigative journalists, and former intelligence officers. MH370, rather than being a simple aviation accident, was increasingly resembling a staged mystery. A scenario where the public was allowed to see only the beginning, while the ending had been cut from the script. And if that was true, then who was holding the scissors? When a single data point changes everything. Amidst the trickle of leaked information following the disappearance, one document made independent investigators and journalists jump from their seats. It was a technical log of the final ping that MH370 sent to the Inmarsat satellite, released only after weeks of pressure from transparency advocates. And within that log, there was an anomaly. An interrupted ping, a signal that doesn't fit the crash narrative. The final ping, recorded at 8:19 a.m., nearly 7 hours after takeoff, was long assumed to be MH370's last goodbye before it ran out of fuel and crashed into the Indian Ocean. The shocking discovery in electromagnetic wave analysis and Doppler algorithm. During an analysis of electromagnetic waves and the Doppler algorithm, a British signal analyst discovered there are signs that the final ping did not come from a crashing plane. Instead, the signal resembled that of a device being rebooted, similar to restarting a Wi-Fi modem. This completely contradicts the theory that the plane went into free fall due to fuel exhaustion. It's as if someone deliberately reactivated the system to send the final ping, creating a false trail. If this was a fake data signal, who could have done it? To send a ping from the SATCOM system of a Boeing 777, you would need an active auxiliary power system, the ability to control the satellite network system, a deep knowledge of the Inmarsat signal protocol, something only a handful of aerospace engineers and high-level military technicians fully understand. A shocking hypothesis. Could MH370 have been remotely controlled? Remote control technology real or just a theory? In 2006, Boeing filed a patent for a technology called uninterruptible autopilot system. According to documentation, this technology allows an aircraft to be remotely controlled in cases of terrorism or safety threats, completely overriding cockpit controls. Theoretically, if this system were activated, pilots would have no way to regain control. And here's the strange coincidence. The Boeing 777 was the first aircraft model to be tested with this technology. Immediately, a controversial theory emerged. Was MH370 remotely hijacked? Not by the pilot, but by an external force capable of accessing the aircraft's control systems? This was no accident. This was a mission. One of the first people to support this theory was Field McConnell, a former U.S. military pilot. In an interview, he stated, "I believe MH370 was remotely hijacked, not by accident, not by terrorists, but as part of an operation. But why? And who was behind it?" One theory suggests that MH370 was carrying a group of high-tech engineers connected to telecommunications and semiconductor patents. Among them were 4 employees of Freescale Semiconductor, a company with complex ties to multiple defense contracts. Their disappearance under patent law transferred the ownership of their inventions to the next major shareholder. Coincidentally or not, that shareholder was a financial firm linked to a U.S. defense technology conglomerate. If this was purely coincidence, the world is a strange place. But if not, MH370 didn't just disappear, it was made to disappear. From accident to deliberate action, a turning point in doubt. By this point, technical evidence, satellite signals, remote control capabilities, and suspicious behavior from authorities had pushed the MH370 narrative beyond the realm of an aviation accident. It became a symbol of technological control, information concealment, and a large-scale cover-up. And if a commercial plane carrying 239 people could be taken over, silenced, and erased from radar within minutes, then that means we were never truly in control of the skies. When technology no longer serves humanity, but controls us instead. After theories about remote control, fake ping signals, and classified patents were leaked to the public, panic spread beyond the families of the 239 passengers aboard MH370. It spread globally, a cracking faith in aviation technology. Within just 3 months of the disappearance, major airlines in Asia and Europe saw an unprecedented wave of ticket cancellations. Questions flooded social media, forums, and public Q&A platforms. Is this flight really safe? Can pilots turn off the radar and disappear like MH370? If I make a call from inside the plane, will anyone know where I am? This triggered a worldwide reevaluation of flight monitoring systems. But the findings were even more shocking. Most commercial aircraft can be hidden from radar with simple manual actions from the cockpit. Flight tracking relies heavily on trusting the pilots instead of independent monitoring systems. And the remote control system, designed to protect planes from hijackers, could also be used to hijack the plane itself. The deeper psychological impact when disappearances are no longer isolated cases. A Harvard psychology professor described MH370's impact as follows. "We are not afraid of planes crashing. We are afraid of this. That someone can take control of a plane, fly it somewhere, hide it, and no one has the right to know why. The fear doesn't stem from natural disasters. It comes from our helplessness against the very technology we created." Satellite technology, a double-edged sword. As panic grew, Inmarsat, Boeing, and other companies rushed to announce that they would improve satellite tracking technology to ensure that there will never be another MH370. But this led to a heated global debate. If they had the capability all along, why did they allow an aircraft to disappear for 7 hours? If they didn't have the capability, then why are they now claiming they do? A German investigative journalist wrote, "We live in an era where information is controlled more easily than ever, and that is more terrifying than a disappearance." MH370 was not a failure of technology. It was an example of how technology is used to control the truth, an invisible weapon in the information age. If a plane could be digitally hijacked, as many believe, then it opens up an even more terrifying possibility. Any network-connected system, whether a plane, a submarine, or a power plant, could be taken over. And if MH370 was truly the result of digital manipulation, then this is no longer just an aviation story. It is a reminder that technology is no longer just a tool. It can be an invisible force, shaping the world from the shadows. Political, economic, military impact begins to spread. China, where most passengers were from, began questioning data from Malaysia and the US. Australia, which led the search, suddenly withdrew some deep-sea search teams without explanation. ASEAN nations found themselves in a dilemma, unable to accuse anyone, yet unable to remain silent. A former NATO security advisor, in an anonymous report, wrote, MH370 could have been an accident, could also have been a message. But one thing is certain. Someone sent that message by showing the world, we can do this, and no one can stop us. The deepest question, who really controls the skies? What began as a disappearance became a symbol of helplessness in an era of absolute control. For the first time, humanity was forced to ask, is technology serving us? Or is it controlling us? Is someone pulling the strings without us even realizing it? And if the answer is yes, then MH370 was not just a disappearance. It was the grand entrance of a new power. A power that doesn't need flags, doesn't need armies. It only needs signals. When the world realized no one controlled the narrative anymore. A week after MH370 vanished, the Emergency Operations Center in Kuala Lumpur was in chaos. Satellite maps, radar data, and flight simulations piled up on desks. Officials from multiple countries rushed in and out. But the strangest thing? No one dared make a definitive statement. The Malaysian Minister of Transport repeatedly changed his statements. One day claiming the plane had crashed, the next saying, we're not sure. The initial report stated the communications system was disabled at 1:30 a.m., then revised to 1:21 a.m., then later changed again. We are verifying further. A Western journalist at the scene wrote in his journal, I have never seen a press conference where the only answer was, we are investigating. They were not investigating. They were spinning the narrative. Chaos spreads across information, trust, and power. Within 2 weeks, 3 major theories coexisted in global media. 1. MH370 crashed due to an unidentified technical failure. 2. MH370 was a terrorist attack, but no group took responsibility. 3. MH370 was remotely hijacked and deliberately disappeared. All 3 theories lacked solid evidence. But the strangest thing? Whenever a theory was about to be confirmed by credible information, that information was either retracted or drowned in conflicting data. A signal analyst reported, I found clear Doppler wave patterns showing the plane changed altitude multiple times. 3 days later, the dataset I downloaded was no longer the same as before. Who altered it? Who had access? Who controlled the truth? No one answered. Only silence remained. Madness took hold of those who thought they were sane. Aviation investigators, people who once believed every accident had a technical explanation, began losing faith. A member of Australia's search team told The Guardian, for the first time in my life, I can't tell what's real data and what's manufactured. Meanwhile, the families of passengers, who seemed powerless at first, began turning into amateur investigators. They created forums, hired lawyers, recruited simulation experts, and reconstructed MH370's flight path. Some even traveled to the Maldives and Madagascar, following rumors of washed-up wreckage. A relative of a missing passenger stated, we no longer trust any organization. If we want the truth, we have to find it ourselves. Wreckage or planted debris. In July 2015, over a year after the disappearance, a piece of an airplane wing was found on Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean. The media rushed to declare, MH370 has been found. But experts were more cautious. The debris showed no signs of fire or explosion. No DNA traces were found. No clear evidence confirmed its drift timeline. Most importantly, the wreckage floated in the opposite direction of predicted ocean currents. A marine engineer stated, either MH370 flew in the opposite direction of Inmarsat's data, or this debris did not come from MH370 at all. This isn't just about a missing plane anymore. This is about who controls the truth. In both cases, someone is reconstructing part of the story. And that part is not meant to clarify but to shape our perception. The real loss. Not just 239 lives, but the collapse of trust. When technology does not provide the truth, when data can be manipulated, when international organizations fail to offer consistent explanations, when governments choose silence over transparency, then the only thing left is doubt. Doubt in the system, in what once seemed unquestionable. And from that moment on, the MH370 story was no longer in the hands of investigators. It became a global symbol of the question: what happens when the whole world loses control? When ordinary people are forced to become warriors for the truth? More than a year after MH370 disappeared, international authorities had all but given up. Malaysia no longer held regular press conferences. Australia narrowed its search area. China shifted its media focus to domestic issues. Major news outlets, once running daily headlines on MH370, grew silent. In the darkness of that silence, a global independent investigation movement began to emerge. It had no office, no budget, no legal authority, but it had something the major organizations didn't: persistence, skepticism, and the belief that if no one else would find the truth, they would. Ordinary people became international detectives. One of the most notable figures was Ghislain Waterlooz, a French citizen who lost his wife and 2 children on MH370. Unwilling to accept vague answers from the French or Malaysian governments, or any government, for that matter, he hired lawyers, consulted data analysts, and even flew to China to connect with others who shared his grief. During a hearing at the French Parliament, he stated publicly, "I don't need sympathy, I need the truth, and I will not stop until I find it." On the other side of the globe, Jeff Wise, a journalist and aviation expert from the US, was pursuing a completely different investigative path. Using satellite signal analysis and flight dynamics modeling, he put forward a shocking theory. MH370 did not fly south. Its data had been manipulated to deceive the world, when in reality it flew north into Central Asian airspace. He didn't just blog about it. He published books, conducted interviews, confronted satellite engineers, and demanded access to unreleased data. The largest digital investigation ever seen. On forums like Reddit, Metabunk, and Piruna, Professional Pilots Rumor Network, thousands of people analyzed satellite images, ocean currents, cloud patterns, and even fuel consumption based on aircraft weight. Some recreated the flight in 3D simulations using Microsoft Flight Simulator to test different scenarios. Others wrote AI scripts to compare public military radar data with civilian radar data, searching for discrepancies between what we are allowed to know and what may have been hidden. This was no longer about finding a missing plane. This was a war against the manipulation of information in the digital age. And they hit a wall, not of concrete but of silence. Most requests for raw data access were denied, for reasons of national security. Radar maps had been cleaned before being released to the public. Some journalists who had followed the MH370 case for years suddenly quit or were reassigned. Jeff Wise said in a podcast, "I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I just see that whenever someone gets close to the truth, everything around them suddenly disappears or gets distorted. When people stop trusting anyone, they start redefining truth themselves." Some independent groups began reaching out to former spies, ex-military pilots, hackers, and even anonymous government sources. They didn't need official statements. They had no authority, but they had the questions that governments refused to answer. Who ordered the search in the northern region to be stopped? Why was Inmarsat data only partially released? Why did it take 515 days to find a debris piece with no DNA? Taking back control, but at what cost? These individuals were not just trying to regain control of the MH370 case, but of the story of MH370, of the way we understand the world, of the very concepts of transparency, justice, and technology. But in a world where information is managed as a weapon, do ordinary people even stand a chance? When technology is no longer a tool, but a shield against the truth. As the wave of independent investigations grew, from victims' families and journalists to aviation engineers and amateur hackers, a strange phenomenon began to occur. Information about MH370 started disappearing or becoming inaccessible. Data that vanished from the internet. A well-known aviation archive forum discovered that every MH370 related thread had mysteriously turned into a 404 error, even though they had existed for years. A Reddit user who had analyzed satellite images of thermal trails over the southern Indian Ocean suddenly had his account locked, and all his posts were erased permanently, with no chance of recovery. An independent YouTube channel with nearly 3 million views on a video analyzing the remote control system of the Boeing 777 was taken down for copyright infringement on background audio. Even though the video contained only voice narration and self-created illustrations, the investigators didn't encounter hackers. They encountered an algorithm. And the algorithm, like a silent AI, does not argue. It only deletes. Resistance does not come from people, but from the program system. Imagine this: you are searching for a sequence of Inmarsat satellite signals. You use an online tool to access simulation data. Everything works fine, until you type in the phrase, MH370 Northern Route Classified. Immediately, your connection slows down. The PDF files you downloaded cannot be opened. A few minutes later, your browser shuts down and asks for CAPTCHA verification from your internet provider. This doesn't happen to just one person. It repeats across dozens of independent investigators from France, the UK, the US, Malaysia, and India. It seems as if an AI, operating at the infrastructure level, is filtering out sensitive queries and automatically reacting before humans can intervene. The global information network, a shield or a wall. Google, Microsoft, YouTube, Twitter, now X. All these platforms claim to be committed to combating misinformation and harmful content. But what happens when a legitimate question about MH370 is labeled a conspiracy theory and blocked? An anonymous Google engineer revealed in a private forum, there are certain keywords that automatically flag content as suspicious, regardless of whether it's true or false. Imagine a world where you cannot state a fact, because AI does not understand truth. It only understands probabilities, risks, and flagged content. When AI decides who can speak and who is silenced. Some families of MH370 victims shared their experiences. They couldn't run ads for memorial videos of their loved ones on Facebook because they contained controversial content. Their posts sharing official investigation records were severely throttled due to lack of verification. Even though the source was an official investigation report, the emails containing radar analysis data were marked as spam or violating community content policies. Technology was once a tool for uncovering the truth. Now it is shielding the truth from being seen. The breaking point, when investigators are identified by the very technology they use. A former BBC journalist recounted that after publishing an article on MH370 and remote control technology, he experienced, "I started receiving strange calls, no one answered. My email account received login alerts from devices in Hong Kong, then Moscow, then New Jersey. When I turned on my VPN, Google sent a warning that my account had suspicious activity and would be restricted. No one threatened him directly, but technology knew where he was, what he was searching for, who he was connecting with. And step by step, the system tightened its grip. The most powerful form of suppression is making you silent, without anyone knowing. In the age of big data, AI, and information control, MH370 is no longer just an incident. It is the first test case for a world where those who control information can make you disappear from history, without ever needing to act directly. And if today's target is MH370, then who will be next to disappear simply for daring to ask, what really happened? When the truth becomes the most dangerous choice. The search for MH370 is no longer just about finding a missing aircraft. It has become a battlefield between two opposing forces. On one side, a system of surveillance, control, and information distortion, using technology, AI, and invisible power. On the other side, ordinary people, journalists, engineers, family members of the victims, who are asking themselves, is the truth worth losing everything? Two paths, neither leading to an easy way out. Warnings that are not threats, but are meant to silence. Jeff Wise, an American journalist, after publicly proposing his theory that MH370's data was faked and the plane flew north, started receiving warnings. Not threats to his life, but soft warnings. Be careful with your career. Some stories shouldn't be pursued too far. You're stepping into something beyond the reach of regular journalism. He wrote in his journal, "I'm not afraid of being silenced. I'm afraid that one day I will silence myself out of exhaustion." Meanwhile, Ghislain Waterlooz, a Frenchman who lost his wife and 2 children, faced an even harsher choice. I can keep searching and risk losing the rest of my life to something with no end, or I can accept that I will never know the truth and learn to live with that. No one would blame him for giving up. No one would dare say he was wrong for deciding to stop. But in that silence, the question becomes clearer than ever. What is the value of truth if you are the only one willing to pay the price for it? Choose truth or choose peace. At this point, those still pursuing the MH370 case have lost more than just money, time, and reputation. They've lost friends, been labeled as conspiracy theorists, had contracts revoked, and been abandoned by their companies. Some data researchers abandoned the topic after being denied academic funding. Some journalists had their articles cut, or were asked to move on to safer topics. Some victims' families were forced to sign agreements not to speak out if they wanted financial support from the airline. Truth was no longer something one had the right to know. It became something one had to sacrifice in order to keep their life intact. And yet, some refused to back down. A group of engineers, journalists, and programmers from 3 countries, France, Canada, and Malaysia, launched an open-source platform called Black Box Reborn. This project allows anyone with expertise in data analysis, satellite signals, and radar to examine the entire MH370 case, without needing approval from any government organization. They work in complete anonymity. No faces, no press conferences, only one declaration: we are not looking for a villain. We are searching for transparency, in a world that is deliberately trying to forget. And when asked about the risk of being shut down, they simply replied, "We have nothing left to lose, but the world will lose far more if everyone chooses silence." The final choice is not individual, it is collective. MH370 has long surpassed the boundaries of an aviation disaster. It has become a test of this era's morality. Would you chase the truth to the very end, knowing you may never hear it from an official source? Would you disrupt the system, knowing you'll be labeled a troublemaker? Or would you trade comfort for the smallest chance of changing how the world sees reality? And if you won't do it, who will? This is the point of no return. The moment you ask the question no one dares to ask is the moment you are forced to choose. Live safely in the dark, or step into the light, without knowing what you'll see. And MH370, though no longer on radar, remains a brutal streak of light across modern history. A reminder that sometimes truth doesn't disappear. It only waits for someone brave enough to face it.